Fans of Key on Sports, truly a special episode today. We have Rob Bartlett, legendary comedian, and as a lot of our wrestling fans know him as well, the original color commentator of Monday Night Raw, something I'm sure he takes great pride in, and we are going to talk to him today about that. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure, Vince. You left out a very important credit here. I am one of the top 10 worst wrestling announcers of all time, according to every list that I've been able to see. I'm not number one yet, but there's hope. I can pretty hard vice grip on that position.
Well, you got something to shoot for there, certainly. So it's freezing up a little bit on my end, though.
It is. I see. Yeah, it's. You were kind of looking at me and not laughing, and I thought, "Oh boy, I'm in trouble now."
Yeah. So we'll see how the rest of this goes, and now we can start over. Not a big deal.
Yeah.
How did you start working with the WWF, and what was your knowledge of the product going into that?
The way I got into it was it's kind of an interesting story. I'll answer the second question first. I had no knowledge whatsoever, other than the minimal knowledge that I was able to get by just hanging around my son, who was, I think, 8 at the time, and he was a big wrestling fan. And I had taken him to a match at Madison Square Garden. It might have been the match that Randy got married to Miss Elizabeth. I don't. Yeah. I might that might have been the one that I took him to. He was a huge wrestling fan, and the way that I kind of fell into it, and I really did fall into it. I had done a benefit for Connecticut Special Olympics. I used to do a lot of work for them because when I worked on the Imus in the Morning show, one of Imus's best friends, Mike Lupica, his wife Taylor, was very involved in Connecticut Special Olympics, and so we do a lot of fundraising and benefits for them, and so I kind of got to be their go-to guy, MC, auctioneer, basically bake people's chops and shame them into donating. And there was some event up in I want to say Stamford, and it was outside in a tent for some reason, and I don't remember why. But it was big, it was huge. Just there had been 400, 500 people there, and at the table right up front, closest to where I was standing at the podium, was Vince and his wife. And Vince was wearing a peach-colored 3-piece velour suit. 3-piece, that's kind of his trademark. Velour and peach-colored, I don't know if I would have made that fashion choice. And I spent about 20 minutes hammering him about the suit. I actually did more of that than I did actual material that night, and it was killing. People just loved it, and he took it. He took it very, very well. He was laughing. I wasn't sure if he was really, enjoying it, but he was keeping a very good composure. And so the benefit was over. Made a lot of money, and he sent a card to the radio station. We were at FAN at the time. And it said, I had fun the other night. Yeah, you were great. I'm just really disappointed you didn't like the fashion choice that I made. And, some kind of a joke about how, and so I was great, and a couple of days go by and I was leaving the station. I used to go in after the show was over to record comedy bits for the next day. And so it was an early afternoon. And as I'm driving home, I get a phone call from Imus's assistant. And she said, Vince McMahon called for you. I want you to call him back. And I was, oh, now the other shoe drops. Now it's like, I'm not, I'm in trouble. Because Vince is a very imposing guy, and he's not somebody that you feel like you want to piss off by any stretch of the imagination. And so I call him, and he says, Bartlett, how do you like to work with the WWF? I said, what? I'm putting together this new show. It's going to be live every Monday from Manhattan Center, calling it WWF Monday Night Raw. he laid out this idea, that he had, which was to do a live event on Monday nights from Manhattan. And he had, everybody in the organization behind it. Bobby the Brain, Sean Mooney, everybody. And he said that I would be part of the announce team with himself and Macho Man Randy Savage. So, I thought about it for a second or two, and I thought, why not? If nothing else, my son will get some access to some backstage, photo ops with the guys that he, adores. So I, following week, I think, went up to Stamford, the WWF at the time headquarters, and met with Vince, and we went over to their right across the highway from where the headquarters are is a like a corporate park kind of a thing, and that's where a lot of the most of their studios were, in that area, and their control rooms and whatnot. And went there, and we did a couple of mock attempts at when he played some tape of some old matches. And I met Randy, who was one of the greatest people I'd ever met. He was just the kindest, most supportive, sweetest guys on the planet. And then he made me feel very, very welcome. And he said, Bartlett, if there's anything I can do to help you, just let me know. You want me to be the butt of the joke? I'm your man. So so it was great. It really made me feel at home. It was kind of clear, though, for the first couple of dry run-throughs, that this was not my forte. Vince thought, and to his credit, it would be a good idea to have somebody who was on a radio show, who was used to being live, doing stuff, topical, and that it would help the broadcast, which in theory was a great idea. I think, however, had I known a little bit more about the product, it might have helped just a tad. And I also think that the kind of stuff that I did in my stand-up act was very character-driven, and that's the stuff I did on the radio. And so it wasn't really like one-liners, it wasn't like set-up punchline stuff. And so that was not really a great fit there. And I tried to create a persona for myself. I figured I could be the idiot heel, and it became apparent, painfully apparent, around episode 3 that this was really not going to work. But I hung on for I think another 10. I think I did 13 altogether, or 12 or 13, if I'm not mistaken. And I had two of my favorite moments were when I interviewed Sensational Sherry and Luna Vachon. Up at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center, which was a hockey arena that we used to do the show from every third Monday, because every fourth Monday, because Manhattan Center, I think it was owned by the Reverend Moon, and so they had plans for that room one Monday every month, and so we had to go up to the Mid-Hudson Civic Center. I got to interview Luna Vachon and Sensational Sherry, and I got my clothes ripped off by them, which was a great moment. And but my favorite was when Vince and Macho Man were both at a award ceremony. Vince was getting
function. Vince was being honored.
Well, because one thing, aside from the fact that he's just a brilliant guy in terms of knowing his product and his audience, and the way that he thinks about it and the ideas, he knows what the people want, and he's like the what's the guy, the P.T. Barnum. He's the P.T. Barnum of our age. He really knows, how to entertain people. But the thing that he doesn't usually get a lot of credit for, which he should, is all the charity work that organization does. And they do, they put them. I'm not very good at articulating, as you can tell. I'm usually not up this early, even though it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. everybody in that organization. I mean, the wrestlers constantly, it's every week visiting children's hospitals and visiting kids and all kinds of things. They donate money and time, and it's just that they really do a lot, especially for children's charities. And so he was getting an award that night. It was going to be given to him by, I think, Hulk Hogan. Randy was going to be there, and so we were up at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center, and they told me the week ahead that was going to happen, and I was, okay. What can I do? Because he said I was going to be there with Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. Now, Bobby and I hit it off from the very beginning. I mean, Bobby, in the first Raw I did, played various quote unquote relatives of mine trying to get into the building because he thought that he was supposed to be, one of the commentators. And so that was the bit that they were running. And he actually, he'd do anything for a laugh. He dressed up in drag and dressed up like a rabbi. For some reason, Vince always thought that I was Jewish. I don't know why, but he really thought that I was Jewish. But Bobby was just the nicest, again, just the greatest person. Could not be more warm or sincere or helpful, and just a sweetheart of a guy, and achingly funny. The two of them together, Gorilla and Bobby, could have been like a comedy team, like for real.
They were real like best friends.
And they could have done it. They could have definitely gone on the road just doing comedy because they were that good together. The chemistry was incredible. So I decided, you know what, Vince is not going to be there, so I'll be Vince. Yeah. And I asked the makeup lady that night, I said, do you think you can make me look like Vince? And she says, oh, yeah. So I rented a tuxedo and she got me these shoulder pads so that my shoulders would, be like an aircraft carrier, which is obviously Vince. And she made my lips really big and she got my hair to look like Vince's. And I wore the red tie and put my hand behind my back and I held the microphone and I did Vince the entire show. But I didn't really speak as much as Vince, just kind of make noises as Vince, because when I was listening back and watching, because they used to send me the tapes of the previous show every week so I could watch, and you see Vince going, I'm going to Yokozuna. I'm going to Monday Night Raw. The only thing you could hear him say was Monday Night Raw. And so I kind of did that the entire, Heenan thought it was a scream. He knew what I was trying to do. Gorilla was a little bemused. He was a little, not quite sure what it was about. And I think he actually kind of got angry after a while because he just didn't get it, And right. I think one of the lines I did, if I'm not mistaken, was we came back from commercial and I said, during commercial, I forget who it was, the wrestler, I said, or was up in the crowd and stole a young child or something like one of the wrestlers had kidnapped a kid in the audience or whatever. And Gorilla was, no, he didn't. He was just so upset. But that was my favorite. The following week, we were back at Manhattan Center and there was a room where we used to all go to meet before, for the pre-show, meeting. And everyone there was kind of looking at me and smiling. I mean, the crew at Mid-Hudson that night went nuts because nobody had ever thought of or even dared to want to try to make fun of Vince because I guess they all thought he didn't have a good sense of humor. And so they're all kind of looking at me and looking at the floor. And, I used to love those meetings because, there'd be the wrestlers and all their costumes and everything. And then there would be tech guys, whatever. Everyone just kind of milling around the buffet of grilled chicken and steamed vegetables and lots of IcoPro bars. And Undertaker would be in a corner of the room, squatting, like completely squatting, flat-footed, with his hat off, just staring. And I don't know if that was where he got into character, but that's what he did the entire time for like an hour before the matches started. So he was there in the corner staring. But he wasn't the scariest guy in the room. The scariest guy in the room was Bam Bam Bigelow, because I don't know if you guys remember Bam Bam Bigelow. He was, about 400 pounds, bald with tattoos of flames on his head. And so he'd be over in the corner, chewing on a car battery or whatever. He was, and then Vince walks in and the place gets deathly quiet. Everybody just turns and looks at me. And Vince looks at me and he goes, Bartlett, you're fired. Everybody laughs, big joke, ha ha ha. And he teased me about it, I think, during the match.
Yeah.
And then the following week, I showed up for the show, and there was nobody there. There was nobody in the Manhattan Center. It was empty. There were, the bleachers were still set up, and a camera guy. And they were up at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center. They didn't tell me. And so that was Vince's revenge. So he had.
Oh, okay. That was probably the night after WrestleMania because you weren't there, and they made you call in,
right,
and say you're in Vegas, you lost all your money,
right.
Call that, yeah, because it was very random, and then you were on for about 2 more episodes.
Yeah, and then that.
So I wanted to ask you because to me that was extremely entertaining, right? Now, I'm a little too young to really know a lot about Elvis. Like, I mean, he's famous, right? We've all heard his music. Like, everybody knows Elvis, right? But I wasn't alive for like his run. So I got more of a kick out of the Vince McMahon stuff. But, I want to ask you, so did you have to run that by anybody before you did it? Because I know you said you met with makeup and stuff like that, but because nowadays everything's so heavily produced. So back then, was it just like, this is my idea, and since he's not here, we're going to run with it?
No, I got to give Vince credit. He wanted me to do, he trusted me to do what I thought I could do, what I thought was going to be the best, what was going to be funny. And so, when I came in as Elvis one week, just because I thought it would be a funny visual, and everyone, of course, thought the Honky Tonk Man was making a return. But he didn't know about it. And that happened to be the week that he had Doink hit me in the face with a pie, like really early on in the show. So you couldn't even tell I was Elvis because I had this whipped cream on my face for the entire time. I just thought it'd be funny if I was there as Elvis, taking drugs and eating, just there eating everything. No, I never had, he never asked me to run anything by him.
Really?
No. Okay. And I give him a lot of credit for that because it was, it was a risk. It was a huge risk, one that I'm sure he probably regrets taking, but he was terrific when it came to that. He really, I think he knew so much about show business in general. And I think that he kind of subscribed to the idea, which is surround yourself with people who are better than you and things that you're not or whatever. And he wasn't wrong for thinking that might have been a good idea to bring somebody in from the outside, because it was supposed to be unscripted, and edgy and whatnot. But the problem is I would get too edgy and they would want to shut me up, so I didn't know where the line was, although they wanted us to be edgy, or at least the idea was to be edgy so that we were always kind of testing the limits. But I think USA was just really like not interested in like pushing stuff anywhere that it should, so and I think he used to get
they've gone through stages since then where the Attitude Era, they wanted them to push as much as they could, and nudity and constant swearing and all that, back to kind of like the John Cena era of back to PG, and Hulk Hogan would take your vitamins and say your prayers. So I could kind of see that, but with that show being so new at the time, I think you had the right approach to just lay it all out there, see what works, right? So that's how I took it as a fan. I mean, and the other thing too, it's funny because everything you've talked about, you literally, it's almost like you have my questions in front of you because you just hit every single one as you were talking about.
I'm sorry.
No, I think it's hysterical. But I mean, I always got follow-ups ready anyways. So one of my follow-ups to that was, again, talking about the Elvis stuff, but there were 2 things I wanted to really ask you about. And one was getting the pie in the face by Doink, and was the pull-apart brawl between Sensational Sherry and Luna. Did they, and either one of those things, okay? And full disclosure, we all know wrestling script. Get it? Yep, learned it a long time ago. So
no,
things like, did they tip you off?
No, don't say that, Vince.
No, I never use that word. No, it's the outcomes are predetermined, and I leave it at that. But all joking aside, did they let you know that was coming both times? Did they say, hey, these 2 women are going to tear you apart? Like, wear something that they could rip off? Or,
no.
Like, shocked?
No, until just before the interview.
Really?
Right? Just before the interview, Vince said, Just so you know, they're going to get into a cat fight and rip your clothes off. I said, what? He says, let me see. And he's like testing it to see if it was going to, come away, because it was like my regular clothes. I mean, totally ruined my shirt and my vest. But hey, I'm in it. I'm
I
there.
mean, were you shocked at how strong those women were? And now, okay, so it's 2022. Women are on par with men with athletics. Like we cover female sports. I 100% support it. I just want to preface that before I say this. But this is back in 1993 when there was maybe 3 women in all of wrestling. I mean, were you kind of shocked with how strong a woman like Sherry Martel was?
Well, she was an imposing figure when you met her in person. I mean, I kind of got the idea that she wasn't a shrinking violet, Yeah. And then of course, when Luna made her entrance, I had no experience with Luna, so I didn't know what I was getting myself into with her, because I didn't meet either of them prior to the show. But Luna came out, and so, I think my line to her was about, her head spinning around and spitting up pea soup, and
Yep.
And then when they got into it, that look of fear you see in my face is not acting. That was not, I was definitely frightened for my life at that point, because they were both so strong. I mean, so strong. And so I wanted to get the hell out of there as quickly as possible. And so I feigned, I did my patented finishing move, which was running from the ring in fear. And then I came back. I went to spots, and in the back I had the makeup lady again. I was down to my t-shirt. I tore the t-shirt, and she gave me a black eye, and she gave me some bruises, and then I came out, and then I think I fainted, and then Randy came over and started slapping me in the face, trying to wake me up or whatever. It was, I just went with it. That was the thing. I had a very strong background in improv, so I know how to kind of use whatever's in the room and go with that. Unfortunately, those skills didn't always serve me well on Raw, unfortunately, but it was a whole lot of fun, man. And with the doink thing, I had no idea. Vince didn't give me any warning about that at all, which was really kind of funny.
That's when you get some of the best reactions too.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. Made for great TV. He knew, he knew if he told me, I might do something to kind of upstage the event, right? Or flinch or whatever, not knowing it was coming was perfect. I think that was the thing about Raw that really worked, and why it's still on today, is the fact that, that it's live and anything can happen,
Well, I mean, were you surprised by and again, this is me talking I'm 35 years into being a fan, right? But like you said, one of your first impressions of wrestling was watching a wedding, right? So what the heck? But you're there in person, and you are, 10 feet away. Were you kind of surprised at the athleticism of a lot of these competitors, just how, like a guy like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, being able to flip, being able to twist and not get hurt?
Somewhere towards the end of my time with the WWF, there was a match that went on through maybe 2 commercial breaks.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. I don't remember who it was, but I just remember.
Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It was so impressive to me that these guys could do what they did for as long as they were doing it. I mean, totally committed, and they were, I was blown away. Whenever you see somebody who does what they do best and make it look easy almost, then those 2 guys, my mouth was hanging open, and Vince, every time we would go to commercial, Vince would like try to impress upon me about, do you have any idea what it takes for these guys to do this? And because it's the same kind of, I know this is going to come back to haunt me, but the same principle that goes with a wrestling match, a professional wrestling match, and pantomime, is that when you're pantomiming, pulling a rope, right? it requires twice the amount of strength and concentration because you have to create the resistance, but you also have to create the rope, right? So that it's physically, and that's what these guys have to do. They have to sell what they're doing and make it look, believable. And they really do. They really, really do. And so it's twice as hard as if people were just actually in a fight, so they're working twice as hard. And it was really, very impressive to me.
So I got to ask you too. I got a couple questions left here. Thank you again for your time.
Yeah.
What's fascinating to me is how big some of these guys are in person, and you don't realize it again until you meet them for the first time. The very first episode, like right out of the gate, there's two guys who wrestled that night. One is no longer around. One just went to the Hall of Fame. The first one was Yokozuna. What was your first impressions of seeing a man that large move that quick?
Again, it was just stay out of his way. It's like, it was like, there was a battleship on in the ring. And I think one of the first things I said when Yokozuna came out, that's one big butted Oriental, Vince. And that line is going to haunt me for the rest of my life. And they kind of laughed at me for mispronouncing his name, but they didn't realize what I was doing was I was imitating Mr. Fuji because he used to mispronounce his name.
Yeah.
So, but no one got that, because I had at least done a little bit of my homework. Yokozuna, it was really, but he was a funny guy outside of the ring too.
Fuji?
Yeah,
that's what I heard.
Really funny guy because he was, he'd been doing it for so long. He was such an old school guy and had a really wicked, sarcastic sense of humor. So I used to love when he'd be there because there was always going to be something that he was going to say that was going to make me laugh. He had a very, he'd raise one eyebrow at something that one of the wrestlers would say, backstage in the green room, and I'd be done. That'd be it. I'd just be on the floor. And the same thing. And who was the other one? That
I was going to ask you. So the other one, obviously, a lot of people. Well, actually, I got two more for you. I'm going to throw an extra one in there. But
take your time. I got nowhere to go. So
the next one I had was the Undertaker, because clearly this is a guy that I've met several times, and I have not even gotten a handshake out of. Most of them will stop. They'll take a picture. You could get a quote, whatever you want. This guy, the Undertaker, I wonder if he ever came out of character, because I'm just curious, what was he like behind the scenes? Did he speak? Was he just in the corner, like you said, or what was going on? Because it's just intimidating.
I never saw anybody maintain a character. And, I have done films, I've done TV series, I've done, Broadway, and I've never seen anybody stay in character the way the Undertaker stayed in character. I think when he got up in the morning, he was the Undertaker, and he was the Undertaker until he went to bed at night. I don't think he ever, I certainly never saw him get out of character. He literally, every time he was on the show, would be in the green room in a corner, squatting, right? But straight back, not even leaning against the wall, squatting, flat-footed, as though he were his own chair and just staring straight ahead. It was spooky, but it was great because nobody messed with him. That was probably one of the best things he did for himself. You say he's no longer with us?
No, I'm sorry. Yokozuna passed away.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's sad.
But I didn't know that. Look at it this way too. I got to say this one thing about the Undertaker, and definitely wanted to be on the record here. This is a guy, by maintaining his character, couldn't go out with the boys at night to the bar and drink like a lot of them did when they were on the road. They want to go out and party or whatever, like a Ric Flair kind of guy. Couldn't do it because, like you said, had to stay in that character. And to me, that's an unbelievable sacrifice. No, the last guy I was going to ask you about, obviously, is the famous Hulk Hogan. The reason why I want to bring up Hulk Hogan for this one reason, they brought him back for that WrestleMania push, that big WrestleMania 9 push. And really, he might have been the master of easy paychecks because he was probably on 3 shows, wins the belt, never came back. Wrestled one more time in Dayton, Ohio at the King of the Ring, and that was it. Did you ever get a chance to actually have a sit-down conversation with him at all? or anything in that short time he was there?
Oh yeah, I mean, I met him for the first time at the show, and we talked about. It wasn't Mr. Nanny. It was another one of the movies he did where he played the space bounty hunter. I can't remember the name.
Suburban Commando.
Oh, right, Suburban Commando. I think that had just come out, and I'd taken my son to see it, and we were talking about the movie. You know, and I actually liked him. I thought he was terrific in it. You know, we were chatting about it, and you know, a pretty down to earth guy, pretty serious business guy. You know, kind of knew what he was doing. He was no dummy. You know, and then later on, I used to do him as a character on Imus.
Yeah.
And he would come on as a guest. And he came on actually the day after that whole thing broke with him and was it Mancow and Mancow's wife and that video. Yeah. And man, talk about, you know, sympathy. He just looked so defeated. He looked so hurt. He was so visibly shaken by what had gone down, and he was embarrassed and kind of ashamed and angry, and I just felt awful for him, you know, because he was a, you know, nice guy. I mean, he became somebody that, you know, we weren't allowed to talk about after a while because of the defection, but you know, and I had said to Randy, I said, you know, I'd like to do a show where I do you know, the whole show. And he said, only if you do Hogan too, brother. Yeah. Only if you do Hogan too.
They had a real rivalry. Those two.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you could tell, you know, there was a rivalry there. But Randy was just, you know, I actually like cried when I heard the news about Randy, because he was just the sweetest, just the nicest, most down to earth, you know, this huge guy, you know, he had fingers like knockwurst, you know, it was like, and yet he was one of the gentlest guys ever. And man, what a wrestler. Holy moly.
Oh yeah, he can do it all. I mean, size, athletic ability, promo skills. He was, you know, to me, they call Shawn Michaels as Mr. WrestleMania, because every year you could count on Shawn Michaels having an unbelievable match. Right. But before him, when, you know, because again, I'm at that perfect age where I grew up, like right when WrestleMania had started, like 85, 86, going into those years. So I remember it all. And the first 8 or 9 years of WrestleMania, the Macho Man has a 5-star match in almost every single one. He just stopped wrestling right when you got there. Like right when you got there, he was starting to taper off a little bit. Obviously went over to WCW and restarted his greatness. But as a fan, that was unbelievable. And, you know, another question for you too, speaking of like Hall of Fame talents, do you expect to get a call to go into the celebrity wing at some point of the WWE Hall of Fame?
I'm sorry?
Would you expect to get a call to go into the Hall of Fame for wrestling? And no, seriously, in their celebrity ring, because celebrity wing, they have that now where they bring back guys like
that. I think the chance of me becoming a wrestler and getting in the ring now there's a better chance of that happening than me being inducted into the celebrity wing of the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
That'd be great.
I mean, I've never gotten invited to any of the anniversary shows. I've never, you know, and I've spoken about it on many a podcast and my own podcast and television and interviews. And I've always talked about how I was awful, but I had a great time, and everybody that I worked with was terrific. I mean, the organization, you know, was a really well-oiled machine. And like I said, Vince is a genius, a marketing genius, and a programming genius in terms of knowing what to give his fans, you know, and knowing what kind of product his people want, you know. I have been inducted in the Hall of Awesomeness with Brian Alvarez on his podcast. So I feel, you know, at least I've had a modicum of success in that respect. But I'd be more than happy to attend any kind of an induction where that would happen. I'm not so sure what the fans' reaction would be, however, because the one time I actually got to be at an event, an actual wrestling event. It was at the Garden, and my son brought his friends, and we took a limo in, and we thought this is it's kind of a great thing. He was going to meet them all, and I kept telling him, I said, we're going to be sitting ringside, guys. We're going to be sitting ringside. I mean, they were just could not be happier. And then we get there, and our seats are literally 2 rows from the ceiling. And so I'm like, all of a sudden I go from being the coolest dad in the world to like, who is this,
the biggest
loser?
liar.
Right. Who is this loser? And what's worse is as I'm walking up, people are recognizing me. Right. So that's even worse,
Yeah.
And then I'm sitting there and everyone's looking back and laughing and pointing. And so I said to the boys, I said, stay here. I'm going to go down and see what's going on. So I went down. And the security guy knew me and let me in. And I said, Vince, what's going on? He said, yeah, we're going to introduce you. And we're going to hit you with a spotlight. And you're going to follow you all the way down. You're going to do the walk of shame. You're going to walk in and then get into the ring and you're going to interview Giant Gonzalez. I said, oh, okay. But I stayed in the dressing room, so I didn't have to do the walk of shame. Yeah. And my boys had no idea what was going on. And his friends, and all of a sudden they announced me. And I go out and then get into the ring, and Harvey Whippleman was, I guess, Giant Gonzalez's manager at the time. And I got so heavily booed. And I think things would have been thrown into the ring if they didn't have the guys at security making sure. And Harvey Whippleman was, taunting me. And I was, interviewing Giant Gonzalez, who was like grunting and whatever he was doing. And, by the way, that's not real hair. I don't know if you know that. Anyway, and Harvey starts attacking New York. And, how New Yorkers are just, they're the scum of the earth and whatever. And so I said, you can't say New York is the center of the freaking universe. New York would eat you up and spit you out. Well, I got a mind, and not even that was getting the crowd on my side. But at that point, Giant Gonzalez reaches over and grabs my shoulder and gives me like the Spock pinch and forces me down to my knees. And that's when I invented my finishing move, which was running from the ring in abject horror and fear. So,
well, I think that's hysterical. Thank you for coming on. I want to wish you the best. Now, I got to say one last thing to close the show, though. Clearly, if social media was around during those 13 episodes, God help you, because fans are mean in the crowd. They're even worse when I call them the keyboard warriors. People are insane. They're cruel.
Well, I think time has softened the blow, because, people like yourself and some of the other podcasts. I did a podcast, I think it's Old School Wrestling. They do it from Dublin. I went on their show for the first time. I think it was one of the first wrestling podcasts I did. And I was amazed. I had actually stumbled onto them. They were talking about me. They were doing a watch along of the first Raw. And man, were they merciless. And then I looked them up and I sent them an email. I said, I'd love to be a guest. And I think everyone is always surprised to know that I was aware of how bad that I was. But that, I had a great time, but Vince, if you're out there, I'm free to come to the next anniversary show. And if if there's room for a guy my size in the celebrity wing of the Hall of Fame, I'd be honored to be inducted. But I'm not sucking up. I'm just saying. Just think about it.
I'll write a letter and I'll see what I get.